Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Vedant Sharma. On our second episode of Talks about Travel Thingos, I would like to welcome Romey Louangvilay. Romey is the head of communications at Elemental and serves as the president of the board of directors for Travel Unity, which is a non-profit focused on diversifying the travel industry and creating more opportunities for cultural exchanges. Welcome to today's episode, Romy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Romy, could you tell us about the company which you work for, the Travel Unity, and how you ended up pursuing this career, this industry?
Yeah, for sure. So Elemental, the agency that I kind of serve as head of communications for, we are a full service agency. We specialize a lot in the travel space. So that's like hotels, restaurant marketing, doing messaging, PR, influencer campaigns for tourism boards like Thailand, and mostly all of Southeast Asia. So we kind of run the full gamut when it comes to travel, whether it's a hotel, restaurant, or even the actual destination. Our team has a hand in like that actual communications plan, whether it was the marketing or even like a social media post. So it's kind of a fun job because you get to like travel. Well, pre-COVID, you get to travel, experience the locale. But even with COVID now, you're learning more about the destinations. You're learning about the confidence and the resilience that the local people have in other countries in terms of how they're coping with COVID. So it's still a very rewarding job, even with COVID being here. Now, so that's Elemental. And then for the nonprofit that I serve as board president for in terms of their board of directors, you kind of summarized it. We empower individuals to kind of speak up more. We offer platforms and stages for people to kind of talk about diversity in travel. At the core of the nonprofit is literally trying to change the travel industry, because if you think about it now, in terms of the marketing aspect of travel, most of the people in advertising that you see, they're mostly Caucasian or European looking white travelers. So if you're African American or Black American or Asian American or Latino American or Latinx, and all you see is blonde hair, blue eyes on an advertisement, that makes you feel, okay, I'm not worthy of this vacation. I'm just the help. So Travel Unity, in my role here, we try to change that. We work with brands, we work with companies to kind of educate them about messaging, about marketing, about representation. So that's one aspect of Travel Unity. The other aspects are education. So we do have a person that oversees the education committee. He goes into different schools. He brings different events like excursions to restaurants that underprivileged kids may not even have the opportunity to go to. And a lot of times, like, I take it for granted. I'm like, oh, you're going to like a Szechuan restaurant. Like, that's not a big deal to me. But if you're in an underprivileged neighborhood, going to a restaurant like that one, or even a Brazilian one, or any Italian one, you don't have those opportunities because you don't have the funds, you don't have the money. And the restaurants are usually the first thing you kind of experience in terms of a different culture, as long as it's authentic. So we do work with schools that way, taking kids to different restaurants in the city. We take them to museums to learn about different ethnicities, learn about different cultures. We also work with different schools to have like an ethnic day or a cultural day where kids can talk about their backgrounds. So that's the education front of it. We also work with people with disabilities and companies to make sure that there's like wheelchair access to buildings, making sure that companies' websites have the right formatted text in terms of being able to read it, making sure that people who do webinars, there's a transcript. So it's like little things like that, working with people with disabilities. So that's kind of like Travel Union in a nutshell. I know I kind of got a long-winded answer here, but there's a lot that we do, and hopefully I summarize it properly.
No need to worry about that. As much as we can learn from you, that's just an added bonus.
Yeah. Then I believe you were asking about the how I got into this industry.
Inspiration. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually started my career at Ogilvy. I worked a lot on fashion accounts. Um, I worked on like TJX, which is like TJ Maxx and Marshalls. I was actually part of the whole Maxxinista campaign back in 2008-ish. I did work in Marshalls. I worked on Sunglass Hut. I worked on like brands like Ferragamo, DVF, and a few others. and in French Connection as well. And I think by that time, maybe it's 6 7 years into my career, I had just got really burnt out in terms of like this fashion. I couldn't really tell clothes apart anymore because they all started looking the same to me. So I kind of lost my passion for fashion. Just because it's just I don't know, it just made no sense to me and why we were so stressed out over a dress that looks exactly like the other dress, and that dress was like exactly like the other dress from last year. So I just stopped caring, because the world is full of shit and the world is crappy, and I don't want to spend my 20 hours of my day worrying about a dress that really made no fucking impact in the world. And I would work like 10 15-hour days in fashion, from like 8 a.m sometimes to midnight or 1 a.m just over a fucking dress. And I think at that point I was like, fuck this shit. Like, I'm getting paid like no money, I'm getting yelled at over a damn dress. So I at that point I was trying to leave fashion. um, and then a recruiter reached out to me and she was like, hey, this agency here, they want someone to come in. They like the fact that you have a fashion background because you can kind of elevate the campaigns a little bit more in terms of bringing the fashion eye to it. And the clients were towards the authority of Thailand. So that attracted me because I'm half Thai. So that's how I kind of got into travel, was through a recruiter. And with my first campaigns with Thailand, I started introducing fashion elements to their campaigns, because before Thailand was only doing traditional travel campaigns with like Nat Geo, Travel and Leisure, which is all great and fantastic. But when I came in, I was like, hey, why don't we show Thailand's fashionable side, working with influencers? And that was the first year to start working with influencers when I came on board. And I was like, oh, it's just fashion one here, it's just fashion one here. And then since then, Thailand has kind of grown its presence within the fashion community. For example, like last year, they did something with Project Runway. They've also done stuff with Nordstrom and Bloomingdale. So I kind of brought that element to Thailand. And from there, Thailand kind of got me more clients in travel as well, with Southeast Asia, with hotels, etc. So that's kind of how I got into the travel space.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, you never know where you will end up, right? Once you start your career.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, but I'm sure you must have known when you started your journey in the travel industry that it will be this taxing or it will require these many hours. So, what kept you going for all that time?
In the fashion industry,
Yeah,
I have bills to pay.
yeah.
I
I
had
like your straightforward
my
answers.
phone bill due. I had my student loan bill due. So that's why I kept going until I found.
So, do you still follow fashion a lot?
I do. I like fashion from a hobby perspective, because I've always been into fashion as a kid. I've always dressed differently from the kids in my school. I've always been into like, I've always read GQ. I've always read, back in the day, Cargo magazine, which no longer exists. But for people who are like my age and older, you'll remember Cargo. That was like the fashion magazine for men. I used to read Details a lot too, because when I was younger. And I even read the Vogue magazine just because I like seeing the dresses in those magazines, because they were always positioned really beautifully and it was always like magical. And then when I started working in fashion, I realized the magic's bullshit. The pretty dress in that magazine spread was literally a bunch of bobby pins, hair clips on the model, and a lot of wiring to make the dress like flow a certain way. And I just realized, I liked fashion before I knew how the magic was created. So after working in fashion and learning about the magic and how it was all fake, I was like, I got over it. I like it from the hobby perspective. I like having that charming, magical eye when I read the magazines. I still like it. I just don't like working in it.
So, whenever you travel, do you consider your own fashion into account? Do you travel light or do you travel heavy?
It depends on where I'm going. If it's for business, I only really pack, I guess, work related clothes and maybe some casual stuff for like working out. Because I always try to work out whenever I travel, just so I can stay like maintaining my weight. But if I'm traveling for personal reasons, yeah, I pick clothes based off the itinerary. So if my friends and I have a lot of like nightlife events that we're gonna go to when we travel, then I pack outfits that like, kind of stand out. I'm kind of extra when I dress up. When I put effort into it, I'm actually kind of extra in terms of like my outfits. But if it's like going to be like relaxing at the beach, then no, I pack pretty light. It really based on the itinerary that my friends and I kind of like plan for.
That's actually great. I mean, I've heard this saying that you cannot be overdressed for any occasion.
Yeah.
So, Romy, during your travels, were there any unexpected experiences or any stories which you'd like to share with our audience?
Like negative or positive?
Either one, whichever you are fine with sharing with.
Yeah, I'll share both. I would say I'll start with the negative first. So I do remember, so a lot of, I mean, you're in South Asia right now in India, and but overall in the Asian community, whether it's East Asia, Southeast, or South Asian, our community we tend to favor fair skin. Which is why whitening creams are so popular now. It's because we want that fair skin. I always grew up darker because I am Thai and Laotian, and indigenous Thai people and indigenous Laotian people, we tend to be a little bit darker because we are below the equator. So it's hard to be fair skinned down there. Um, but then obviously with Chinese people moving to Thailand, over the past 100 years, it mixed with our blood, which made us a little bit lighter skin. And obviously with Europeans and France colonizing a lot of Southeast Asia, a lot of European blood got mixed in with indigenous blood, which also made our skin lighter. But I just kept the darker skin genes. So when I was traveling, I won't say what country it is, but when I was in Southeast Asia, one of the countries, people tend to view me as a local. They assume I'm poor because I'm darker. I look lighter right now on camera. I think this is all my lighting here, but when you meet me in person, I'm actually a little bit darker in person. So I think when I travel in Southeast Asia, they assume I'm a local, so they don't treat me as nicely. They're like, oh, he's poor, he doesn't have money. But then when I start speaking proper English, they're like, oh, he's an American, and that's when I started getting treated nicely. That's when I started realizing tourism is so much racism in tourism, from the marketing to how you're treated in a lot of the countries. Because unfortunately, if fair skin is viewed as rich, because you're fair skinned, that means you have an office job, you have a career, you're not on the farm, you're not on the streets, you have money, which isn't true. It's such BS. But unfortunately, a lot of people have that mindset. So that was a negative experience I had when I was in Southeast Asia. It was kind of unfortunate too because it was one of my first trips there, and to kind of be treated like I didn't matter because of my skin color, it was like, it was kind of shitty. And that's when I started joining Travel Unity, and I was like, you know what, I want to help change the tourism space because I love travel. I love visiting other countries. But a lot of people who are even darker than me or other minority groups, they don't get represented. They don't get represented in advertising either. So it's not always encouraged for them to travel. So that's one of the reasons why I also joined Travel Unity was for that experience. And I would say a positive experience was when I would say when I was like a little kid. I was probably like 13 or 14. I went to Thailand for the first time with my mom. And I would say, when I first landed in Bangkok, where my aunts picked us up, I did feel like a connection to the country because I was born in America. So coming to Thailand as a 13-year-old kid, it was a culture shock. It was hot as hell. Because I was used to like Alabama, where we had air conditioning, the cars had air conditioning, but my aunts didn't have cars, so we took cabs everywhere, and the cabs have AC on for some reason. And then my aunt's townhouse, or I don't know what you call it, but it was like a home that was attached to other homes. But anyways, they only had aircon in like one room, so I was like, oh my god, it's so hot here. But I got used to it. But it was good. I learned a lot. I got to connect with my family. I learned more about my culture, where I come from. So it was a good experience.
Amazing. I mean, like you always have this feeling that whenever you visit a place, you'll always have this culture shock. But it takes only a few days to get used to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I was 13 too. I was a spoiled American little kid.
Yeah,
So
you had no option.
I had no option. Yeah. I was 13, so I was just kind of following my mom around. And she was just telling me to shut up. She was like, shut up. She's like, you're Thailand, be quiet.
Speaking of traveling, would you recommend people to travel during the ongoing pandemic?
It depends on the travel. I would say as long as you're careful and you follow all the guidelines and you get tested before and after, sure. I don't think you should limit yourself to exploring the world. But with that being said, you need to be cautious and you need to be cognizant of other people. So if you want to like fly to a different state within America or fly to a different country, I would just say talk to your doctors, read all the guidelines from the airlines that you're flying, check with the airlines to make sure they're going to have space in between the seats, and ask the airlines themselves, just saying, hey, what are you doing to prevent or reduce COVID exposure? Make sure you feel comfortable. Talk to the airlines, and then obviously get your tests before you get on the airplane, and then when you come back, get your test again. Is I'm not saying don't travel, but like just travel safely.
Any other precautions or recommendations which you'd like to give our travelers who are traveling during the pandemic, which you might have incorporated yourself?
Yeah, I would just keep reading the news, read about the number of cases in that area that you're going to. For example, I would love to go back to Thailand. They haven't had any new cases that I'm aware of in the last like 100 days or so. So for me, oh, no new cases in 100 days, that seems pretty safe, but the borders are closed. So I would just say keep reading the news, read about the local economy in the place you want to go, read about the cases there. Just be informed, be heavily informed.
Right. So, is there any specific place which you wouldn't mind traveling to even during the pandemic?
I would actually love to go to Thailand if the borders were open right now. I don't know. I just kind of miss it. It was affordable living. You have access to like almost everything there in Bangkok, especially. And so much, and they have indoor activities too, but obviously at a reduced level. But it seems more normal than it is where I'm at right
Maybe our conversation awakened the nostalgia.
now. Maybe.
Well, I'm sure you are aware that the tourism industry is unfortunately one of the worst hit due to the pandemic, the COVID-19. So, how do you think this will impact traveling post the pandemic when everything is all better?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a couple of years to get back to what we thought was normal pre-COVID. I just feel like it's not going to happen next year or 2 years from now. I just feel like it's going to take years to rebuild everyone's confidence, just because I think COVID scared everyone, rightfully so. But I think, yeah, I don't think we're going to go back to normal anytime soon. I think we'll still be traveling just on a reduced level. We might have longer wait times for cleaning and for safety and for reducing exposure. But yeah, I just don't think we'll go back to normal for a few more years.
Do you think we will get back to normal at all? I mean, I've read a lot of statistics and reports, and they say that traveling wouldn't be the same ever.
I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the same. Like I don't think it's ever going to be the same pre-COVID. It might be back closer to what it was pre-COVID, but I don't think it's going to be what it was pre-COVID anytime at all. Just because people are they're heightened in terms of like cleanliness, they're heightened in terms of like safety now, and people are going to want to be reassured that it's safe, and I think that's going to cause the airline industry and the hotel industry and the restaurant industries to clean more often, to have contact less ways to interact, like the contact less key entry. So I think technology is also going to play a factor in travel as well, to give us more space between each other.
Yeah, and I think that due to the pandemic, every country will be sanitizing everything. Whenever you go to a restaurant, you'll see sanitizers. Everywhere you'll see sanitizers. So we'll have to get used to that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Even like my hobby stuff, like jujitsu and Muay Thai. I'm starting to do jujitsu a little bit more now, but obviously in a more controlled setting. But we clean before and after each session now. Before we would just clean after each class, but now it's like after each session. So it's very heightened in terms of cleaning.
Maybe that's part of the program, part of the
Yeah,
training.
yeah.
So tell me something. Like, have you heard of these concepts which are popping up called travel bubble?
No, not familiar with travel. What is that?
Well, it's a thing which a lot of countries are doing. They are basically forming these bubbles within which citizens can travel from one country to the other. So, for example, US and Mexico might be part of a travel bubble. That would mean that the people from US and Mexico can travel between these countries without having to quarantine themselves.
Okay, yeah, I've read something about that. I didn't realize they were called travel bubbles. So I read about it with Southeast Asia too, because I
Right.
believe Malaysia, Singapore, and
Hong Kong.
another
Hong Kong.
maybe Hong Kong. Yeah, I think they're doing it too, but I didn't realize they were calling it travel bubble because in the articles I read they called it something differently. But I think that's what it basically is. I think different.
I think they call it the travel corridor, I think.
Yeah, I think different publications call it differently. But yeah, I'm familiar with the concept. The name bubble didn't sound familiar until you described it, but I think that's fine. I mean, it's a start. It's an initial start to get travel kind of going back to a level that we're kind of used to. And I'm all for opening borders safely. I don't want borders to open and then like everyone catches COVID. I definitely want it to be safe. And for me, I'm trying to follow all the guidelines from Fauci and from other medical doctors, not politicians, but from actual medical and scientists. So I'm following that community in terms of like what is considered safe.
Thank you so much, Romy, for joining us today. It was a pleasure hosting you. And to all the viewers who saw this video, please like and share our video if you found it interesting and helpful. With this, we'll be taking your leave. See you on the next episode of Talks About Travel. Bye bye. Thank you so much, Romy, for joining.
Thank you.